Voice of college football breaking down Mississippi State. The Dogs are headed toward spring ball here in just a few weeks in Starkville. We got Daniel Black on the line. Daniel has joined us throughout the years to break down State, coming off a nice 9-4 season. Daniel, how you doing today?
I'm all right, Mark. How are you?
I am doing just fine. And of course, we would be remiss moving on to 2023 without stating the obvious in regards to the coaching change and Zach Arnett taking over for Mike Leach. It would be typically a cause for celebration, finishing with that 9th win with a bowl victory in dramatic fashion. But of course, Mike Leach absent and no longer with us. So you've lived in the area. You're an alumnus. Just your thoughts about this situation and how it's changed everyone.
Well, it's not something that has never happened before in the world of college football, but it's something that's never happened at Mississippi State. And I think it's something that in hindsight, hindsight's 2020. In hindsight, I think Mississippi State fans, and I can't speak for everyone, but I know at least a very solid portion sort of took having Mike Leach as head coach for granted because Mississippi State's never really had someone that high profile leading the program, someone that is that notable. State's had successful coaches in the past, but in terms of a coach's impact and status in the world of college football, in terms of just their name recognition, Mississippi State's never had anyone quite like Mike Leach. So when even before he passed away, when it was announced that he was going to the hospital, you see this outpouring of support throughout not just Mississippi circles or SEC circles, but all of college football spanning the entire country. And I think that really touched State fans and the State program in particular. State fans had their criticisms of Mike Leach, as everyone does as a football coach, but sort of recognizing the fact that he had such a large impact on the sport. Mississippi State's program under Joe Moorhead before Mike Leach took over was sort of on a decline, and Mike Leach brought it back to that 9-4 caliber program that Dan Mullen had. He, for only being at Mississippi State for 3 years, he had a very, very large impact on the football program. It's obvious. Mississippi State's current head coach now was a Mike Leach assistant for 3 years in Mississippi State. Most of Mississippi State's defensive assistants were on that defensive coaching staff under Mike Leach. So Mike Leach's impact is going to continue as long as Zach Arnett is head coach of Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State was very, very fortunate, not only from a football perspective, but just from a personality perspective, to have someone of Mike Leach's profile as head coach, because it's never happened before. And it's something that I think really benefited Mississippi State from a national landscape.
And of course, Will Rogers is a classic Mike Leach quarterback and certainly performed extremely well in that system, was, I believe, the first primary quarterback to gain that status as a starter as a freshman during Mike Leach's career. Had another stellar season at 35 touchdowns this past season. So Will Rogers didn't create a lot of fanfare in making his announcement that he was coming back, but he is back for another season. And if you look at not only Mississippi State and SEC statistics all time, but look at college football stats all time, Will Rogers is way, way down the list, but all you have to do is add about 3,500 to 4,000 yards to his total and the various numbers, and he shoots in close to the top 10 range. So Will Rogers could put some historic numbers on the board before it's all said and done.
Absolutely. I mean, he's already gotten there. I think he's in the top 10 all time already, at least in the SEC in career passing yards. If Mike Leach were coming back, I think it would be a shoo-in that Will Rogers might break that record that Aaron Murray holds, this coming season. With Kevin Barbay coming in as offensive coordinator, it'll be sort of interesting to see what the statistics are, sort of the pass run breakdown is going to be. Judging by Kevin Barbay's past, I think we're going to see the ball run on the ground a bit more, but he seems like he's pretty fluid in in terms of figuring out what his personnel is, in terms of what kind of offense he'll put on the field. So it'll be fascinating to see. I can't even really answer that question yet. It's something that we're probably going to have to see through spring and in the first couple of games of 2023 to really get an answer. But yeah, Will Rogers, in terms of strictly from a number standpoint, as you alluded to, Mark, one of the most productive passers in Mississippi State history. If not even one of, he is the most prolific passer in terms of passing yards and passing touchdowns in Mississippi State history, already broken two of Dak Prescott's records, and Will Rogers still has 2 more years of eligibility, including a COVID year. So it'll be very, very fascinating to see how Kevin Barbay uses Will Rogers in his scheme. He's the atypical Mike Leach quarterback, tons of passing yards, a really good completion percentage, not a lot of interceptions, very accurate, can make throws into tight windows. So he's definitely one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the country and in the SEC because, of course, the classic description of a Mike Leach quarterback who puts up these numbers as a system quarterback. So it'll be very fascinating to see with the new offense coming in, just how prolific Will Rogers can be in 2023.
Daniel, do we know who the backup may be?
Yes, the backup's probably going to be Mike Wright. He's the transfer from Vanderbilt. This is where it gets interesting because while Will Rogers is not a mobile quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, not many of Mike Leach's quarterbacks were. Mike Wright is the sort of a textbook definition of a dual threat quarterback. His situation in Vanderbilt was very fascinating because he started the year, benched for part of the year, and then came back. I think I might be wrong. Pardon me for not doing my research on this, but I think he started in those Kentucky and Florida wins that Vanderbilt had. But if
Yes,
I'm
I
wrong,
believe
I'm
so.
wrong.
Yep.
He did. So that's going to be sort of fascinating to see how much of a quarterback controversy that's going to be between Will Rogers and Mike Wright. Rogers is obviously the better passer. Mike Wright's the better runner. So we'll see just how much Kevin Barbay will want to commit to potentially running the ball at the quarterback position with Mike Wright coming in.
This seems to be a pattern. I ask about backups in particular, and people bring them up, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, forgot about that guy. Yeah, I did hear a couple months ago, Mike Wright to Mississippi State ran for over 500 yards at Vandy, in addition to 12 touchdowns and 4 picks. I guess on the surface, I find it a little odd that a guy vying for a starting quarterback position who mostly won it at an SEC school would be transferring to be a backup at another SEC school, albeit a better school, but still, or a better football program. All right. Jaquavius Marks and Dylan Johnson combined for 96 pass receptions last year. Now, if that is not a hallmark to a Mike Leach offense, then nothing is, because you don't see those kind of numbers out of running backs anywhere else. And he's had guys in the past catch 90, 95 passes by themselves in the past. But I got to think that their roles may change now. Of course, Dylan Johnson, as you mentioned to me, moving on to Washington, Jaquavius Marks back to lead the running game.
Right. When Kevin Barbay was announced as offensive coordinator, Jaquavius Marks, whose nickname is Woody, tweeted a GIF of Woody from Toy Story dancing, because I think he realized he's going to get a lot more carries now, sort of celebrating the fact that he was getting an offensive coordinator that is accustomed to running the ball a bit more than Mike Leach. Of course, that's not a criticism of Mike Leach. That's just how the offensive systems work. I don't think anyone in America ran the ball fewer times than Mike Leach's offenses did. Although we did see the production on the ground increase from this year from last year, and in Mississippi State's best offensive games in 2022, you saw more of that run pass balance. And Jaquavius Marks was the leading rusher for Mississippi State last year. He's coming in as a senior. I believe he has 2 more years of eligibility, including a COVID year. Had 113 carries, 582 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I think it's, even though you're going to see the number of receptions he had decrease, I think it's a good option to have in the offense. The fact that he has been catching so many passes for the past 2 to 3 years. Also, as his backup, there's Simeon Price too, who's a sophomore. Simeon Price stepped in the bowl game in the absence of Dylan Johnson, who had already entered the portal and ended up having the best game of his career in the bowl game, was the leading rusher in that game over Jaquavius Marks with 7 carries and 68 yards. Nearly had the game-winning touchdown run with 30 seconds left in the football game that set up the game-winning field goal. So we're definitely going to see more carries with Kevin Barbay's offense. Jaquavius Marks has proven that he's a really tough runner. He's a good running back. Of course, Mike Leach's offenses weren't known for their running backs. And as you mentioned, even if they were known for their running backs, they were known for them catching the ball. Jaquavius Marks has proven himself to be a great running back on the ground. And we're definitely going to see that more highlighted in 2023. And it's sort of exciting to see the potential of the ground game in the future.
Ra Thomas moves on to Georgia. He was in the top 10 in the SEC in both yardage and in touchdown receptions. But for the most part, most of the threats outside of Austin Williams back in Starkville.
That's right. Mississippi State's leader in receptions from 2022 is actually coming back, Rufus Harvey. He did not, you mentioned that Ra Thomas was the leader in yardage, but Rufus Harvey was the leader in receptions. He had 53 receptions for 505 yards and a touchdown. He's a Starkville product, someone that Mississippi State was actually not going to offer until Mike Leach showed up in Starkville, and within about a week of his appearing in Starkville, Rufus Harvey got an offer from Mississippi, from his hometown school, Mississippi State, and signed in February of 2020. And he has proven himself to be a very productive receiver. Right behind him is Tulu Griffin, who is arguably, it's not much of an argument. I think he is the most explosive all-purpose player on this football team. Last year, he had 40 receptions for 502 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also, Mississippi State's kick returner, an extremely explosive kick returner, can get, just about anywhere. If he gets any open space in a kick return, there's a very good chance he'll take it. If not for a touchdown, for a whole lot of yardage and give Mississippi State really good field position. He entered the portal. There was little drama with him sort of late. It was fascinating because he was Mississippi State's most active portal recruiter on social media, and then he entered the portal himself, and now he's coming back to Mississippi State. So it was sort of a roller coaster of emotions there, but he's back. Definitely going to get probably a lot more touches at different positions and formations for Mississippi State in 2023. Jaden Wally is going to be a senior next season. He's sort of been a mainstay of Mississippi State under Mike Leach. He had 34 receptions for 348 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2022. Justin Robinson is a name that I think is going to get a lot more publicity in 2023. Last season was his first year at Mississippi State after transferring in from Georgia, and he had 30 receptions for 326 yards and 3 touchdowns. But his best performance of the season came in the Reliant West Bowl. He was the Reliant West Bowl MVP with 7 receptions for 81 yards and a touchdown. And also State added, I figure it'll be interesting to see where this guy can mix in. State added a transfer receiver from Eastern Washington named Freddie Roberson. Last year, he was Eastern Washington's leading receiver with 797 yards and 7 scores. So a lot of returning production from Mississippi State at the receiver position, despite losing Ra Thomas and Austin Williams. But with Mike Leach, you're going to get tons of receivers. That's going to be another spot for Mississippi State, as I mentioned, where Mike Leach's legacy is really going to carry over into this season. Because despite losing 2 of your most productive receivers, Mississippi State brings back, a handful of others who were almost, if not more, productive than those 2. So that's a very big bonus for State.
And then it all works if the offensive line's doing its job. So all those guys are fun to watch in space, but the offensive line has to be doing its job. And 4 of 5 returning, that's obviously a good sign.
That's right. LaQuinston Sharp is the only one not coming back. He was a 6th-year senior last year. But 4 of 5 starters returning and a couple others who got playing time. Cam Jones is a 6th-year senior coming in. He started 13 games at left guard in 2021. And then last season was right tackle. Cole Smith is another 6th-year senior. So all of a sudden, you lose a 6th-year senior, but you're returning coming into 2023. You've got 2 6-year seniors, and Cam Jones and Cole Smith. Stephen Lasoya was someone who came in for Quatravius Johnson. while he was dealing with injury. He started in 9 games, and played in all 13. Nick Jones is another one who's coming back. He started all 12 games in 2022. I mentioned Quatravius Johnson, better known as Dollar Bill. Number 69 on the field, number 1 in your hearts is what I like to say. He dealt with injury last year, but still played in 9 games and started in 5. And also a couple others, Percy Lewis and Albert Reese. While they only started 1 game apiece, they both played in all 13. So in addition to bringing back 4 starters, you've got 2 or 3 others who found playing time in 2022 who will probably get more in 2023 and are very good depth pieces for you. So Mississippi, I mean, under Mike Leach, as far as the offense went, as far as the offensive line went, and whether it was pass blocking mainly and then, rush blocking. So bringing back that experience from an offensive line that was very solid and helped produce state's best offense under Mike Leach, bringing back that kind of starting production is, as you mentioned it's a very, very big and important bonus for state as they start to run a new offense.
There you have it, folks. The rundown of the Bulldogs offense with spring practice just a few weeks away in Starkville. Daniel, we appreciate you stopping by, breaking things down for us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Mark.